Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. This is part 4, the last part in the second round of Project Orchid updates. Basically this is what I call the cooler, shadier types. A little mix, and again, same format, same order of plants as last time, a link to the previous video, and a list of the plants in the description. That seems to be the format I'm going to stick to, at least for this year anyway. And this will be the last one in the set, so that strange expression, without further ado, let's get going. Right, first one's this little Masdevallia, primary cross I believe, and I hadn't had it long and I'd potted it up in live sphagnum. And the sphagnum I've got is not very good. So this idea I was a bit worried about. It compacts incredibly easy. It's almost impossible to water without it compacting, which shuts the air out. So a rethink was in order. But at this particular point it had been potted up this way. There were some signs of some new growth and some of the leaves were a little bit tatty on it. But, you know, it was a nice little plant, so it was a matter of looking for progress. Right, so there's not really a huge amount going on with this Masdevallia, quite honestly. It is pushing up some new growth, some new leaves, and a few leaves have been lost. They were the ones that didn't look too healthy last time round, so no huge loss. But what this plant really needs to do now is get an increase in the sheer number of leaves that the plant can support, because that will help generate some more roots. So at the moment I'm just looking for more and more new growths. But I thought it might be a good idea this time to actually count the leaves. I forgot last time. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mature leaves. I think we'll count that as a mature leaf even though it's not full size. So 6 mature leaves and 3 distinct new leaves coming. And we'll see what that looks like next time. I'm not sure that's actually big enough to bloom at the moment. Quite set back after being, you know, translocated from where it was originally from to where it is now, repotting it, changing the media effectively to the live sphagnum. So it's just got some settling down to do, and obviously during the summer when it's warm it's not its ideal time to put on its best growth, but it's trying. So yeah, as I said, we've got 6 existing leaves and 3 new ones pushing up, so we'll see where that one goes through the summer at its worst time. Right, this was the Miltonia hybrid that was chosen, a non-bloomer. It was given to me as a division, so it was a matter of pushing on this nice new growth at the front of the plant, the front view. And at this point in time it was starting a pretty good looking root system at the front of that growth, pushing down into the media slowly but surely. So, you know, it seemed to be coming on okay. And the new growth on it was maturing nicely, and at the time I was thinking it's possible that this one could bloom. Not definite, might have had to wait for a new growth, but what we can do now is move on and see what it's like. Now, last time we looked at this Miltoniopsis, this was its strong new growth pushing on. It hadn't bloomed and it was starting a good new root system pushing out from the base there. Those roots are pushed down into the pot now, and I mean, I got this as a division from Hannah, and I was greatly pleased because I've been after a yellow Miltoniopsis for a very long time. We now have a lovely yellow Miltoniopsis. It's just opening, and effectively I've been naughty. I've been delaying doing part 4, waiting for one of these blooms to be fully opened, and now it is. It's a lovely spike, and most Miltoniopsis spikes grow upright. This one has arched over nicely, so I've got four 4 blooms. This one's fully open now, and quite honestly, what a beauty. Obviously the next thing as far as the plant's concerned will be another new growth, which I'll have to wait for. But in the meantime, we have a bloom, so that can come off the non-bloomer list. But I mean, as a division, you've normally got to wait for a new growth to mature. At the very least, sometimes you have to wait for 2. So I'm pleased to have got that one to bloom. Absolutely stunning. And it's a good yellow as well. Some of the yellow Miltoniopsis I've seen have been a bit wishy-washy. That is absolutely gorgeous. And with that splash of red, just a hint, not a big splash, because to me that would take the edge off of it. Just enough to say, here's a little bit of red veining to go with your 2 or 3 shades of yellow. So, yeah, a bloomer. Yay! When we last looked at the Dracula Bella, this had been potted up in live sphagnum in an open basket, which just has to be because the spikes push out down the base of the plant, down from the base of the plant. They need to have somewhere to escape to be able to bloom. Unusual pattern for an orchid, but that's what they do. So if you're going to ever go for Draculas, you have to bear that in mind. And being in an open basket, boy does that dry out quickly. I really have to keep my eye on that because they shouldn't ever dry out really. So that this is a little bit of a problematic plant as far as keeping hydrated. But we had a couple of spikes on it, which I was pleased about. It had bloomed. I'll put a pop-up of the bloom. They're quite spectacular. And 2 nice spikes progressing at this point. So at this particular point in time, at this time of year, I was looking forward to some more blooms. And at the time I could see no reason why we wouldn't get any. But now last time we looked at the Dracula Bella, I believe it had two spikes pushing on. Both of those spikes failed. The buds just blasted, and at the moment on the plant I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 spikes, and yet another bud has blasted. So it seems they just get to the point of where the buds are going to swell and they blast. Now I'm putting that down to the temperature because I have no other logical reason at the moment. It stays moist, it stays watered, it doesn't dry out, and the plant up above has pushed on several new growths. It's got more to come. There's a nice one in the back there, nice one here, nice one there, and it's matured some leaves. So it's growing okay. It's pretty healthy for a Dracula growing in my environment, having to put up with a fair bit of heat this time of year. And all I can hope for is that it keeps producing these spikes, and eventually we'll get into the autumn with the much cooler nights and the cooler days, and they'll start to mature and bloom again. I mean, it has bloomed before. It's not like it failed every single spike, but at the moment that's what it seems to be doing. There's very little I can do about it. You just have to hope that, it still produces some spikes in the cooler months, and then those should be okay. But at the moment we're not going to see a bloom on this for a while, I don't think, unless we get a dull period perhaps. If we get a pretty long dull period at a point where one of those buds is starting to swell, it might bloom again. But at the moment I'm happy that the plant's growing new growths and it's still trying to bloom, and maybe one of these will actually mature. But at the moment that's what it's up to. As I say, there's not a lot I can do with it. I can't really create a special place with higher humidity just for one plant. It's going to have to put up with what it's got, and maybe we'll get some blooms, autumn into winter. Maybe this is never going to bloom in here in the summer months because it's just too warm, and relative to that warmth, obviously the humidity, although I keep it around 70% with the heat, for a Dracula that's probably not enough. But that's all I can do. So we'll see how it progresses, but it's growing. That's the main thing. The plant is getting bigger, therefore stronger. And under the new growths are probably new roots shooting out. So coming on. Right, this little Restrepia, at the time we looked at it last time, was on the hit list for a repot. It was due a repot. Fair bit of moss stroke algae, as yet undetermined in the pot, but you can see it in the pot anyway. So it was due a repot. This was one of the ones I got from the Eric Young Foundation as quite a small plant. And it had grown a couple of new leads on it on the right hand side there, which bloomed, but they were crinkled, which is a sign of just lack of hydration combined with lack of humidity. Always going to have a problem like that with some of the Restrepias, especially when it gets warm. But that's where it was last time. I'd had some blooms on it. It was currently in bloom at the time. Well, last time we looked at the Restrepia, it was in desperate need of a repot, which has now been done, and as a consequence, it's sulking. It had quite a good root system, don't get me wrong, and that root system's now in nice new media, relatively heavy on the moss to keep it nice and moist, stop it drying out, so it's in a condition where it should start growing again soon. But at the moment I see one new growth just starting. Okay, so it is starting to come back into growth. They're very attractive, the new growths, when they start. A lovely patterning, sort of quite reptilian-like, with the spotting and the markings. So it's just starting to think about coming back into growth. And I'm hoping now with the new media and the new moss and new bark and root system probably getting going again, that it should be able to keep itself better hydrated this time round, and then we can stop these crinkly leaves. I mean, there's only a couple on here that are bad, and they're old leaves. That one's slightly there, and some very old fading leaves. These are seedling leaves down the bottom here, from when it was a seedling. So anyway, we have a single new growth at the moment, and again it's trying to get itself going at the worst time of year really. I'm going to try and twist things round with things like Masdevallias, Restrepias, Miltoniopsis. The cooler, shadier types are going to pick up better, I believe, if repotted at the end of the season, not at the beginning of the season. So I'll take that on board for future reference. But slowly recovering from a repot, this one. Now the Paphiopedilum that was chosen was Maudiae, which once upon a time I thought was a species, but it's not. I think it's primary cross. This had two growths on it, linked, conjoined, whatever you want to call it, and that's how this plant had always been since I got it. Pushed up two new growths, both of them bloomed, and then it pushed up two new growths and the two old fans died. That's how it's just grown for me, not very well in fact. But at this point in time, only one of the latest two growths had bloomed, the other one hadn't. That's the first time it had done that. Again, it was in desperate need of a repot, and on the list, but just waiting for such times as the bloom had finished, and just on the list but not an emergency. So that was that one. Right, following on from last time then, where there was one sort of conjoined at the bottom, we had a bloom on one of the growths, and the other growth was a non-bloomer for the first time ever with this plant. So it's been repotted, and at that time I took advantage of the repot to actually split it. Quite honestly, I've got a feeling it might do better as two separate plants. They virtually fell apart anyway. They weren't trying to hang on to each other. So what we've now got is the unbloomed growth here as a separate plant, and then the bloomed growth over here with a tiny little bit of the previous fan left, which probably isn't going to last much longer. You see the leaves are going, and on this one it started a new growth, so that one's coming back into growth now. One of these has got to be selected as the project plant, because I don't want to follow both of them as part of the project, if you see what I mean. And the chances are I've created one to go. Yeah, I don't need two, not the same. And we'll see what happens. This one may still bloom, it's possible, although it may not. It may decide to be a non-bloomer and push out a new growth. Be nice if it pushed out 2, that would be the day. Obviously this one is got a distinct future that I can actually see because its new growth has already started, and for once it's started right down at the base of the plant, so any roots that come off of that new growth will go straight into the media. Now both these pieces had reasonable roots. I won't say brilliant but reasonable, so they both should push on now in nice fresh media, and I'll decide which one to keep when we get to the next project update. I think that's the best time to do that. Right, the little mini Phalaenopsis hybrid, at the time, back then, it had been mounted upside down, the 2 bottom leaves, and it had grown 2 leaves previously, a while before, that had decided to be the right way up, so it's got an unusual look to it. Had a few active roots growing. We had a spike pushing out the top there with some buds starting to form, and an old spike down near the bottom to the left that looked like it was branching. So a mini Phalaenopsis, no ID, but looking forward to the attractive blooms coming, and doing okay on its mount. Not bad at all, I was quite pleased. And last but not least, the little mounted Phalaenopsis no ID hybrid. I've actually got an ID for this, I just haven't updated my notes. Somebody on the Facebook group positively identified it, as far as I'm concerned, from their own plant, which had a name and was in bloom. They posted the pictures, and as far as I'm concerned, the blooms are identical. Yeah, so I'll go with that. I just haven't got round to doing it yet. Maybe by the next project update I'll have sorted that out. But there is an ID for this now. Now this is just a little mini Phalaenopsis. It was mounted effectively upside down. That's these 2 leaves, and it then grew 2 more leaves up the right way. It's showing no signs of any new leaves yet, which is not untypical for a Phalaenopsis in bloom. But what we've got are 2 very attractive blooms. Yeah, they're a pale yellow with a very good magenta colour and a nice unusual shaped lip, so I do like these. And what's going on here is we've got 2 blooms that have been open a while, another one that looks like it will progress and not blast, with what is the extension to that spike sitting there waiting. That probably won't move until these 2 drop. And then over here is the old spike, which has a branch here and another branch on the end, which are moving incredibly slowly. As far as roots are concerned, I've got some active root tips in places, one heading around the back there, and some old tired roots. But for a little plant that size, there's more than enough roots to support it. It's just up to, for me, to keep them hydrated, being on a mount. So that's that one. Hopefully by the time we see that next time round, we'll be into vegetative growth probably, and we should have some leaves moving on it. It's a very small plant, but you know, it's maintaining its spikes, that's the main thing, so it's reasonably happy. And they are attractive. I think the light is quite bright in here at the moment, so it's probably washing out the colours. Right, so that's the last one. Okay, that was it, part 4, and that's the second round of updates done now. The next set are liable to be around the end of August into September, around that time of year. So I can put all this stuff away now, clear my disc off and everything, ready for next time. And effectively that will be an update towards the end of the season. Following that, the last set of updates for the year are liable to be end of November into December, so once the growing season's, you know, over and we're well into winter. And during that final phase, I will be comparing back to the first project update stills at that time the previous year, so we'll be looking at a whole year's growth during that set of updates. But I'm thinking well ahead of where we are at the moment. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed it, and as I say, the next round of updates have got quite a gap between now and then, and we'll see what's happened in the gap when we get to the next set. Thanks for dropping by. See you next time.